And real quick on this, one of the reasons FOMO is so important is because if an investor is interested in your company, right, what is the sense of urgency for them to do it now, right? They can just wait a little bit till you're farther along, you've de-risked slightly more, right? Maybe you're low on cash and they have more leverage to negotiate. So like they can always just be like, well, I'll wait a little bit, right? The only thing that will kind of like is like a tool or a weapon like against that is creating a sense of scarcity, right? That they're going to miss out, right? That people are interested in this route. It's going to fill up. So that's why they need to do it now.
Welcome to the H-Files, the new series of the Hands-On Business podcast, where we dive deep into the world of healthcare leadership and the unique challenges facing small to medium-sized healthcare businesses. I'm Hakeem Adebiyi, and after years of helping businesses grow in various industries, I'm excited to focus on the area that I know the best, healthcare, one of the most dynamic and impactful sectors in the world today. In this series, we're going to explore what it takes to lead and grow in healthcare, from navigating the complexities of regulation and innovation to overcoming the everyday hurdles of building a sustainable business in this fast-paced environment. Each episode will feature real-world insights, expert interviews, and actionable strategies that can help you push your healthcare business forward. So whether you're a leader in the space or an entrepreneur ready to break into it, the H-Files is here to give you the edge. So here we are, episode 1 of the H-Files, i.e. the Healthcare Files, and that's my new series of the Hands-On Business podcast, which is going to be focusing specifically on healthcare. And the key aim of this series is to look at the challenges, the trends, looking at success case studies in the healthcare space. Now, we're doing that with a view to helping you, the viewers and listeners, take away some actionable advice that can actually help you be more successful in your healthcare business. So, where to start? Well, I'm actually going to start with Medtech, because I've had lots of startup Medtech companies contact me recently asking how they're going to commercialize their ideas and their devices and expand their reach into new markets. Now, full disclosure, the reason why that's actually happening a lot recently is because I've just launched the Healthcare Export Accelerator, which is a program to help SME healthcare companies, as the name suggests, accelerate their commercialization journeys. And I've therefore been focusing from launch on medical devices. So this series and this specific episode is hopefully going to help lots of medtech SMEs. So on today's episode, I'm going to be speaking to Spencer Jones, and Spencer is a registered nurse turned medtech entrepreneur. So it's probably a journey that some of you will be familiar with. A CEO at Lapivations and a founder at Exo Medtech. He's an inventor with over 10 patents under his belt across a variety of areas: vascular access, laparoscopy, and orthopedic devices. And Spencer's taken devices from idea to FDA clearance and 2 of them to commercialization, and is very passionate about growing medtech ecosystems and cultivating the next generation of medtech innovators. So I'm going to be speaking to Spencer about the biggest mistakes early stage healthcare companies make. And obviously, as I said in the intro, then what we're looking to do is not just talk about the challenges, but also then talk about what are the strategies for success based on those challenges. So obviously, who better to speak to on the topic than Spencer, because he's obviously lived those challenges and those challenges that SMEs face in terms of, getting funding, getting into market, and then obviously commercializing their products. So welcome, Spencer.
Yep. Thank you for having me. Really excited. I think a lot of these topics are not discussed enough and not discussed candidly enough. So I've got some battle scars, some war wounds from my time dealing with these challenges, and excited to get into it.
Yeah, no, excellent. And haven't we all, anyone who pretends they've launched a med device or gone from ideation to launch or to any of those stages that haven't got war wounds is probably not telling you the truth, I would say. So the first question, which I just want to get into, because one of the things that you said that you're really interested in cultivating, medtech ecosystems and the next generation of medtech innovators. So just tell me a bit about that. When you say, medtech ecosystem and cultivating that next generation, what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was like my journey into entrepreneurship, I was very lucky, right? I worked hard, I put in the time, all of that stuff. But kind of looking back, it was like very, very lucky. I got into an accelerator program, was one of 8 companies, hundreds applied, whatever. Um, and then that put me in a place, got into another accelerator program, was able with my job to move to Memphis for that. That's where I plugged into a kind of medtech ecosystem. Memphis is a big hub for med device manufacturing, Medtronic, Smith and Nephew, some of the biggest companies are headquartered there. And so that kind of got me plugged into that network of experts and mentors, as well as capital and all of that stuff. But what I realized is, too much of your, chance of success, I call it your luck surface area. Too much of that is just sheer, geography and, where you live and kind of how lucky you are, frankly. And so, if you're in Southern Florida, Southern California, Memphis, Warsaw, Indiana, Minneapolis, if you're Boston, if you're in one of these hubs, you can knock over something and hit a medtech mentor or service provider or capital partner. But if you're not in one of those hubs, which I wasn't in Arkansas, I just didn't have access to that network. So cultivating the next generation of entrepreneurs and medtech, but also the ecosystem. I think a big part of that and what we're trying to do with Exo Medtech is, take that luck surface area and widen it, make it a more virtual first type of network where you can connect with people all over the world that are innovating in medtech, kind of accountability group, meet experts, mentors, meet your next hire, whoever it is. But that's what we're trying to do. And I think the training and the curriculum, and I mean, I've seen some of the content that you're making is like really unique and brilliant. But I think a lot of the content out there for training medtech innovators is just bad and dry. And there's no MBA for medtech. And you can't go to Leeds and say, hey, I want an MBA in medtech innovation. It just doesn't exist. And it's just like, are you going to go work at a big company for 12 years to try to learn this? Like, innovation happens when it happens. And so that's one of the other things is trying to kind of give people that playbook, right, for medtech innovation, whether you're a nurse or a surgeon or a biomedical engineer coming in.
Okay, so that explains that, and I think it's a very, as you just said, it's much needed. It's one of the reasons why I started my course, because I was looking exactly as you were saying and saying, actually, you've just got to learn this on the fly. To be honest, there's nowhere really where you can go and say, right, I want to go step by step through a process. And that's obviously why I'm doing what I'm doing, why you're doing what you're doing. So that's good. So that's good to get that up front. So let's dive straight in. There's always lots of mistakes that we've made and that you'll see the medtech companies make on a regular basis. So what's some of the most common mistakes that you've seen early stage healthcare companies make when they try to scale their business? Because that's what everyone wants to do in the end.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think one of the first ones, is companies will focus too much on trying to go wide before they've really gone deep. And what I mean by that is like, they'll try to focus on filling the pipeline, right? Because they want to have that quarterly meeting with investors and say, yeah, we've got 100 opportunities in the pipeline. And like, that feels better to them than getting on an investor call and saying, yeah, we've really been focused on the 20 opportunities that we have, hand holding. 8 of those are implementing, and we're going to put all hands on deck to make sure that we implement correctly in those accounts. They felt cared for, the customers are heard, we have compliance up, right? Because I think that when you try to go too wide, you can look down and say, well, we've got 10 customers, but they're only using it at about 20% of what they should be using it at that rate, right? So I think that's a big, and utilization, compliance, whatever you want to call it, is difficult, right? And you can't, unless you just raise a ton of money and have some huge team, it's really difficult to be pounding the pavement with outreach and new opportunities and doing the ride-alongs and visiting those kind of new opportunity accounts while you're also hand-holding through the implementation conversion and kind of high penetration, right, at those accounts. So that's number one. I think number two is people not investing enough in champion development. It is much, much harder to get things through the value analysis committees. And we could talk about this all day on why, hospitals are getting purchased by PE groups. More physicians now than like ever before, I think, are hospital-owned employees versus independent contractors or part of a physician practice group. The consolidation within healthcare. Now you've got, instead of one hospital having their purchasing process, now they're a part of, Globocorp Hospital Corporation that is, super standardized, and everything runs through corporate, and everything is increasingly contractually purchase driven, right? Top down. So I think like that champion development, working with whether it's your user or your surgeon or whoever it is that's going to be your champion inside the account, is really critical, because sales reps even like aren't invited or allowed in some of these value analysis committee meetings, right? So like your champion is the only voice that you have in the room, other than some like printed materials that they're going to have. So being really intentional about it, understanding the process that you're going to put them through, having it be repeatable for you and your team to develop those champions, and like keeping it simple. Like these docs have a million things going on. They may be championing other products. Like if you give them like a 40-page white paper and are like, now I want you to highlight this on page 6 and this on page 9, like keep it about them, their voice, their story. Hey, clinically, this is why I need it. It's better than everything else I have. And, the cost increase, or if there even is a cost increase, like is minimal. I really need this. Is going to help me do my job better. Like that is going to land better than like beating them over the head with like clinical study, facts and figures and stuff like that. So I'll say the last one, I think companies stop innovating a lot. Like they'll get their product on the market and they think we're going to ride this thing into the sunset. And it really, I'm talking about product development, product innovation. Because I've seen, if you want, like in Medtech, if you want like, probably 2.5 years, we need to roll out a Gen 2, lighter, faster, cheaper, more, better, whatever. If you want that in 2 to 2.5 years, you need to be working on it like right now, right? So this whole idea of like, we're going to get this product on the market and then we're just going to wait for 2 years to work on any second product. Like you're 4 to 5 years out from that second product. And if you see a big need for COGS reduction or some feature that you need to roll out that you didn't account for, like you're behind the 8 ball. But I also think like product, like innovation, like when I say they stop innovating, like aside from the product, like you can innovate on supply chain, like you can innovate on packaging or how you're bundling it, or strategic agreements, co-selling agreements with other partners or whatever. Like on your sales and distribution, you can innovate. Like, for instance, Starbucks, right? They innovated around a number of different angles that made their business super, super successful, right? Like, anyways, so all that to say, I think they can stop innovating on product, but other parts of their business. And I get it, they're laser focused on sales, but they do that. They kind of have that myopic focus at the detriment to the rest of their business.
So I'm going to pick up just a couple of things that you said there on each one of those points. So the wide versus deep, because I see that all the time. Even when you're selecting markets, people always come to me and say, all right, can I get into 30 markets in the next 6 months, for example? And you're like, yeah, you can. I can always get you in. But what is your purpose and what you're trying to achieve? As you just said, it's a lot better to say, well, actually, I'm going to pick 3 and I'm going to make sure that I've actually got into those, because then everything that you learn from those 3, you then use in the next. If you're going into 30, you're not going to have a decent plan. You're not going to have anything that's actually going to be substantial. And the same thing as you were talking about when you're talking about actually the market. So how have you sort of like encouraged people to actually do that? Because as you identified, one of the biggest reasons why they do it is because they don't want to sit in front of the board and say, oh, I'm only working on 3 accounts, and the board's going, 3 accounts? How do you put that narrative together?
Yeah, I think from a narrative perspective with like your investors or stakeholders, I think you can just say like, look, like we could have 10 accounts at 25% penetration, and that's going to be worth the same as getting 4 accounts to 100% penetration. We're going to learn way more, and they're going to be better reference customers, right? Like I think you kind of, if they push you on that, which if they're savvy, they won't, right? But if they do push you on that, you can just say, look, there's for us to get to our financial goals, right? Our 1 year, 2 year revenue target, if we're only at 30% penetration, it's going to take 3 times as many accounts, right? Like we just don't have the manpower to do that. But what we do have the manpower to do is figure out how to more quickly with our existing resources, get to 100%, right? First account may take you 6 months to get to 100%. Second, maybe it's 5. And then you can really create a documented, repeatable process where you know exactly how long it's going to take you per bed or whatever to get to 100% utilization. So I think the way you pitch it and the narrative piece is just about, you know, what is Occam's razor to hit our financial metrics? And I think you'd say, yeah, getting to 190+% penetration in a customer is the best way to do that. It's like Michael Scott from The Office, right? He said, is it easier to get a new customer or keep an existing one, right? So it's obviously easier to keep an existing customer and increase that penetration. But so I think part of it's just about like, what's the best way to achieve these financial goals? But like everybody knows, if you're trying to scale, if you've got a well ironed out, repeatable process, it's going to be way easier for you to scale. So I think part of those initial 10 customers is a learning experience. Like you said, like going into 3 markets, it's a learning experience. So you learn so much from that. You take all of those lessons and put it into a scalable process. I think if you lay that out with, 99% of investors, they're going to say like, yeah, that makes total sense.
And I think just to add there as well, Spencer, I think what most people, I'm not saying all, because some people want to maintain the business and just grow it and grow it and grow it and be the owners of that business forever. But lots of businesses are, especially medtech businesses, they're in it because they want to scale and then get, an exit at some point. And I think you'll probably agree that an investor or someone who's going to buy into business is much more interested in seeing a process that you understand. So if you've got 15 accounts and they're all 25% penetrated versus 5 or 6 which are 100% penetrated, you've then got something that's reproducible. The person who's coming to buy the business can actually see what you're doing, and therefore actually all I need to do is go into new markets or new accounts and reproduce the process they've already got because they've already boxed it off. So I think that's something that people should always think about. You always start with the end in mind, and if you're going wide rarely excites potential buyers as much as going deep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's if that strategic acquirer is looking at the business and saying, hey, I'm in 100, we're currently in 1,000 hospitals. What's the revenue potential? They've got to mark that down based on your penetration, if that's all you're showing them you can achieve, right? Or else they're going to have to figure out how to get penetration done with your product. That's a big risk, right? It's an unknown, and they don't like unknowns.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I think that's pretty good on that one. So in terms of obviously scaling your business, there's lots of elements that you then need to take into account there, and one of those is obviously your sales team, probably one of the most important at that time. So in terms of the right kind of sales force model, what sort of advice do you have, when you're early on in your journey? What advice would you give in terms of structuring a sales team for a healthcare state-up, getting the right model at that early stage?
Yeah, I think one of the first things to do is just understand, like, what's the most analogous product. Like, you may have there's a direct competitor, right? Like, or 4 of them. What are they doing, right? Like, especially the ones that are doing it well. Like, do they have a direct sales force? Are they using independent distributors? Are they using regional distribution groups? Are they using, your big box distributors, your Medlines, your Cardinals, whatever? Like, what are they doing in terms of sales and distribution? Because chances are that's probably one of the better ways to do it. And that might not always be feasible, but at least you'll get like a benchmark for like, hey, of these 4 companies, I know that 3 have a direct sales force and 1 is semi-direct, semi-right distributor based. But I think like just really trying to understand through researching your competitors, but also just speaking to sales reps and distributors that are like in that specific space, or maybe just as close adjacent as you can get. Because they'll tell you like, hey, this model doesn't really work well for X reason or Y reason. So I'd say like just to really understand what works best, really think about the economics as well. But also like, I'm a big fan of like not going completely all in on one strategy. Like if you're like, hey, I think, it'd be great to have direct reps, but we can't afford to have a fully direct sales force. So we're just going to go fully distributor based. Like I would always, in a company in that situation, I would always recommend like, hey, like get 1 or 2 direct reps if you can in key areas, and then do your distributor territories elsewhere, because then you'll kind of have 2 models to test and say like, hey, we're seeing a lot more throughput with this one. If you're all in on one strategy and it doesn't work, that process of switching to the other strategy is like a very long process. It's, you know how long it takes to find, vet, engage, train, really get rolling with a new distributor group. It's months and months and months. So that's one thing. Two, I always like to say, like, people are coin operated, especially salespeople, right? So you have to make sure they're incentivized, like, especially when you're really getting going and even in that early scaling, like, profitability, if you can get the top line revenue there, profitability usually will come. And you can have, agreements that first year is different than second year, it's different than third year, but like, whether it's your sales incentive plans or your baseline commission or whatever, money talks, like, they have to be incentivized. Direct reps, yes, you want to incentivize them. It's a little bit different because they're employees, but like, if you put yourself in a distributor's shoes, like, they can choose what they've got 12 things, maybe 30 things in their bag. They wake up and are like, what am I going to spend time on? If you don't think that what's going to make me the most money, right, and what is the easiest to sell, it's top of mind. So you got to incentivize them. I'd say last thing, and this is more for, if you're using like an independent distributor model or kind of like, regional distributor groups or what have you, but really try to like, don't underestimate the time that it takes to really actively manage reps. It's especially if you're doing monthly calls, right? You've got to do a little bit of, prep before the call, check on them. What do I need to talk to them about? What are the metrics from my notes from the last call? Then you got to execute the call. You got to put whatever that follow-up is. So like, if you've got 30 reps and each one is going to be an hour of time to do pre-call execution and then post, plus the scheduling for all of them, right? Like, that's 30 hours of work. That's like almost a full week of every month, right? So like, if you're trying to even touch base once a month with every rep and you've got 30 reps, like, you can't, I've seen a lot of people like, we'll hire the VP of sales. They'll do it. Well, do you want your VP of sales working on strategic accounts? Do you want them assisting on implementations? Like, so I think like, whether it's product managers, regional business directors, kind of inside sales enablement type support, but like, don't put too much on, like, don't underestimate that and just shove it onto like one VP of sales person, because it's a ton of work managing and kind of fostering that relationship, getting them what they need, keeping tabs on it, updating the CRM. I mean, you probably know too, like, managing reps is not easy. It's a lot of work.
It is, and it's something that runs through everything we're talking about. Really, it's about planning, isn't it? It's about planning, it's about organising, knowing exactly what you need from a strategic point of view, and then linking that through to what you need tactically, and then resourcing appropriately. Because that's one of the biggest things that I've seen is people either they don't resource appropriately. So either they haven't got the resource to manage reps, or they haven't even thought about having reps. And if they're using a distributor model, they seem to think that you can manage them remotely. Everything you've just said about managing reps is exactly the same as managing distributor. You still have to go out with a distributor. You still have to go out. You can't. What I see lots of people doing, which is a disaster, is they think that managing a distributor is going once a month and sitting in the office with the higher ups and thinking, oh yeah, well, they're telling me what's going on, and you have no idea what's going on in the field. You don't understand the market. All you're doing is getting information for 3 or 4 hours from somebody who's managing it's just managing you, because they want to keep your product in their bag. They're not going to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So you have to get out and actually really get in the marketplace so that you actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, and I'm curious too what your thoughts are on this. Like, everybody wants to scale their business, everybody wants to grow, like you said earlier. But like, I'm curious your thoughts. I've seen some companies like have a hyper focus on like everything we're doing right now has to be scalable, and they're like on customer 1 or 2. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. I mean, like, and feel free to disagree, but like, I've seen that and like tried to do it in the past, and like, it's such a knife fight and you're constantly learning and having to adapt that like, I'm kind of like, nothing is scalable on customers like 1 through 5. You just have to figure it out. And like, that entire process to me is like, you're figuring out what's scalable. So just do what you need to do to get it done, and don't spend an exorbitant amount of time setting up some full system. Just do what needs to be done and then say, did that work well? Let's work it into the rest of a scalable process later.
No, I completely agree because I'm a process obsessive, but you can't build processes. You can't build processes without data. You need the
Yeah.
data, and you're not going to get the data until you've done it several times, and then you think, that works each time.
Hmm.
So when you're first starting, I'm not saying you're not blindly going in the dark because you've obviously got
Right.
some idea because you've done things before. But this is another thing that people need to understand is, I've launched products loads of times, so you've got an idea of what works, but every product's different. Every device is different. So you can't just say, oh, well, I launched it like this for that company, so I'm going to do exactly the same and it's going to work exactly the same, which is what people don't understand. So with any business, the first at least few weeks is me understanding the business. Then it's going and speaking to customers, so I understand the customers. Then it's looking at the value proposition. People seem to think that you can come in for a day and say, right, yeah, you now understand the product, and now you just give me a value proposition and the marketing and go-to-market plan. You're like, it doesn't work like that. It's not possible. You need data to feed any effective system. So I completely agree. You
And can
need.
I,
Yeah, go on.
yeah, no, sorry. I was just one like quick example of that too, like where when it can be like kind of a waste of money. Um, we built like this, for training, sales training, right? And it was end user training for like nurses, right? And like, you know, uh, like you build a big poster, right? And it's like, oh yeah, it's got all the stuff, and we can reference it, and the nurses can see it, and it'll be great, and they'll just hang it right in front of the nurse's desk and whatever, blah blah blah. Or, um, and then like when you really, so you spend all this money designing it, then you spend all this money printing it, you get all these copies, you get them laminated, all this stuff, and then you realize like, oh yeah, we really don't have anywhere to put that. You can put it in this room that no one cares about. And so all of a sudden, like a critical part of your sales training that you spent $5,000 on printing and laminating these and all this stuff, there's no place for it to go in 90% of the nursing units, right? Or it's like way out of the way. So like what you really needed was just like a little trifold that can set on the desk anywhere. But like you wouldn't know that until you did it. But because you tried to make this big scalable thing and order 1,000 copies, you just burned, however much money. But it's just an example of like you have this big master plan, and then what's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That's what it's like with your first 5 customers.
No, it is, and it's all about. I mean, I'm not going to say I come from a digital marketing background, but I've done a lot of digital marketing, and I think what I always try to do is learn from arenas which are different than medtech, because medtech is actually much faster moving than pharmaceuticals, which is my original entry into healthcare, but it's still quite what's the word? Quite regimented, quite slow paced. And when you look at
Yeah.
digital marketing, what you're describing is exactly what they do. They try something. If it works, they try it a bit more. And then they scale it once they know it works. If it doesn't work, they just bin it and try something else. And then bin that and try something else. Whereas in medtech, if you rightly say, people go, oh, no, because it's medical devices, because it's so important, it's healthcare. So we need to make sure we've got it 100% right. And 100% right means you're spending a shed load of money before you even know it works. Just as you said, my suggestion would be make sure you know it works before you start spending a shed load of money, and actually really understand whether you need, even when you know it works, as you just said there, do you need to spend a shed load of money, or do you just need a quick poster which you can laminate yourself, you put it in a particular area or whatever you do with it. It doesn't have to cost you the earth at all.
Yeah.
So it's so it's interesting. I think you're right. I think we're coming from the same place on that one. But I think the good thing that you're saying there is it's basically about it's trial and error, isn't it? And it's when you're talking about the sales team and the distributors, it's about don't hunker down on one size fits all, because different things will work in different markets. And I'm agree with you. It's always useful to have some on the ground presence, and even if you can't afford a salesperson. Necessarily, as in, like, I need 3-4 salespeople. There must be somebody in your organization who you can second to be working in that market, to really get to understand that market. Because otherwise, you're just completely dependent on the distributor, and they could be telling you anything, and you can't challenge them because you don't know the market. I think it's one of those things that you really need to think about before you start going in there. So, okay, so that leads me neatly on to the distributor and partnership, because that's one of the biggest issues that organizations seem to have when they're, especially when they're trying to expand outside of their home geography. So from your point of view, I mean, I've got millions, but what mistakes have you seen companies make when they're trying to get the partnerships and distributors, and what should they really be focusing on when they're building those relationships?
Yeah, no, so when they're, I think one of the big things finding is you really have to understand what else is in their bag and what they're having. I always ask, what else is in your bag? What else are you having success with? What's moving? What's like the average price point? But then also like, what is the average like account worth for the stuff you're selling? Right. And like, some of them like the point of this isn't to like figure out how much money they're making or what. The point of this is to say like, what share of your attention is my product that is X per unit, but you sell Y for at one hospital every year, and that's going to net you Z in cash commission, right? Because if you're out of whack on that, like you're just never going to get the attention. So that's one thing on the kind of the vetting and finding side that's really important. I think, especially with surgical stuff, it's so much about the surgeon relationships. And so like really lean in and just be like, do you have like, what are your strongest relationships with these specific types of surgeons? Because ultimately, like there are a lot of products where it's, if the rep's like, yeah, I can bring you 3 surgeons and they'll use this, like, great. That's amazing. Like you would be a great rep, right? If that could happen. And like, so to that point, once you've got this relationship, I think narrowing focus, a lot of people don't really do that, or they'll send, and I've done this too. Like, hey, here's 11 clinics and 39 docs in your area in a 30, 45 mile radius. Go get them, like go after them. And it's like, I think there's some really good ways that you can be more targeted. There's some different softwares out there. Alpha Sophia is one I really like, Acuity MD, MedScout. But like you can get procedure specific data to say, hey, I know that Dr. So-and-so, this surgeon, she's doing this number of cases per year at this hospital versus this ASA. Like, so you can get very specific. So all that to say, narrow the focus, because if all you're telling a rep is like, I want you to work on these 3 customer targets, right? These 3 surgeons or these 3 accounts. So when they decide to spend their time and energy on anything, they're going to be hammering one of those 3 every time. And like we said, deep, not wide, it just kind of plays into that same strategy as well. Sometimes I feel like people have an inability to like cut bait when they need to. I'm not saying like, you give them 3 months and then they're gone, right? Like that's not it. But like when you have a feeling that things aren't working and you communicate clearly and directly and saying, hey, maybe our expectations were out of whack. How do we get to where we need to be here? Because, if we're not making money, you're not making money on this product either. No one wants that. And if you try that and you're just not getting, any good feedback, the reps aren't responsive, they're blowing off calls, they won't do ride-alongs, they're not like kind of the bare minimum stuff, like the chances of that turning around are pretty slim. And, so like, I'm not saying just like one strike you're out, but like if holding on to a really underperforming relationship, whether it's with a rep or whatever, sometimes that can just be you're just delaying the inevitable. You know what I mean? But I think like to that point though, last point here, one of the biggest mistakes is just like setting expectations, across the board, right? So expectations on training, how they're going to be trained, how you expect them to train customers, what the time commitments are for implementation and conversion and increasing penetration, kind of who owns the relationship after what point, right? Like, is there a point it ever turns over, or is it shared after a certain point? Because I think all of that, I have seen that kind of like cause a lot of friction where it's like, well, we wanted your, it was your account, but then when we went to implementation, you stepped in, but that means I didn't want to help you anymore. And it just can cause friction. So I think just very clearly laying out your sales cycle all the way through conversion and high penetration and retention of that account.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice, because I mean, the one thing that we do is that we put, which is what you were talking about earlier, is the ideal partner profile, so that you're actually, you know what you're looking for. And people get sick of me saying it, but I keep saying, like, if you were recruiting for a board, would you genuinely just go to an exhibition and hope that somebody comes across your path and they're phenomenal, or would you actually know what you're looking for and go and headhunt for that position? You do the latter all the time. And then, as you said, having very clear expectations for them, but also so they know very clearly what they're going to get from you. It shouldn't be, right, here's the product, now you get lost and come back to me when you've made loads of money. And if you don't make loads of money, you're rubbish. It's like, well, this is a partnership here, so what am I getting from you? And as you said there, that those questions you said right at the outset, in terms of understanding where your product is going to fit. So just because you love your product doesn't mean anything, actually, because if your product's average selling price of, let's say, $50, but actually they're selling capital equipment that's going for like 500,000 a pop, I can assure you, you're not going to be getting much time. So you need to choose wisely and choose companies that are actually in the right sort of vein, with the same sort of selling price. And as you said, the other one that you mentioned was actually, have they got contacts with your customer group? Because everybody will tell you, oh yeah, I can get in to see everybody. And then the amount of times I've said, oh yeah, just show me the list of people that you would target in the first instance. Give me a one-page business plan to say who you're going to target in the first. And then you're seeing all these low-level grunts who have got no decision-making authority whatsoever, and you're thinking, right, you're never going to be able to deliver the sales that I require if you haven't got the contacts at the level that you need to. So it's just doing a bit of due diligence, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And one final point on this too, like, a lot of startups really don't, or like founders, they don't really like understand the dynamic here, and it can cause them to make some mistakes. But if you're recruiting regional distributors, independent sales reps, people you are not paying a salary, people you are just paying a commission, they may be like your product, but they may act really excited about it, be like, yeah, I want to take that on, I would love to sell that. Because if your product takes off, they get to reap the benefits and just kind of like ride on the coattails, right? But if it doesn't, right, like, it's no skin off their back, right? But then they can also kind of keep it from a competitor, right, in that same territory. So they've got one more thing that competitor doesn't. So I mean, it's basically the concept of like a land grab, right? Like, distributors will do that, sales reps will do that, and like, it's not even necessarily nefarious. It's just like good strategery, right, on their part, good strategy on their part. But anyways, I think that's something that a lot of founders and people don't appreciate, that like that can happen. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, without doubt. The amount of sob stories I've got when someone says, "Oh, I got this distributor. They promised me they were going to be doing $1 million within 2 years. They've been there for 5 years. I've not sold 20,000 yet." Okay, yeah, that's. And where did you meet that distributor? I met them at Medica. I met them at Arab Health. Nothing wrong with those exhibitions, but
Yeah.
You're unlikely, if you had no idea who you were looking for and someone came up to you and just said, "Oh, I'm in this market. I can sell it for you," and you've done no due diligence. Well, it's hardly surprising that it's not gone very well for you. So I think you're right, and there's lots of techniques to actually get those distributors to work with. And you were talking about before, having some kind of commission structure, having some kind of, don't necessarily give an exclusivity immediately. Well, I will give you exclusivity, but you have to demonstrate you can sell in this area first, and then if you can sell them, if you can deliver there, then I'll give you exclusivity. Because as you rightly say, a lot of time they'll just say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be brilliant," and then you signed up a 5-year agreement, and then at 6 months in, you're thinking, these guys are rubbish, but how do I get out of it? And you never want to be in that position.
Yeah, or make that exclusivity really narrow. Here's your you said these are your 5 best relationships. That's your territory. You bring me one, I'll expand it. Let's go do it. You know what I mean?
That's it. You want to give some kind of motivation to them to work hard on your product. If you just give away the keys to the cupboard every single time, as you said, it goes in the bag. If he takes off, they're delighted. And actually, interesting enough, what tends to happen is, especially if it's innovative, which most medtech are, otherwise you wouldn't be bringing them to market, we hope. But they will get very excited, and they will actually start believing their own hype for about 3 or 4 months. Then they realise, oh, actually, this takes a lot of hard work to actually get into those people and get it, and then they just turn off. and then just go back to what makes the money and what's always made the money. So it's about, that's why it's so important that you, as a manufacturer or a founder, you're supporting them with all the knowledge you know to facilitate them having quick wins. Because if they get quick wins, they start working harder. If they're 2-3 months in and they, and doctors are now saying, or clinicians or surgeons are saying, I'm not sure about this, they start losing enthusiasm, and then you're in for a world of pain. So I think that's really good advice you give there. Obviously, one of the things that early stage companies struggle with is fundraising. You see it all the time. I see it all the time. What mistakes? I mean, I'm always putting it like this what are the challenges that people find when they're seeking investors, and what's the best way to approach it? In your experience that you've seen work in terms of getting that investment and getting the right level of investment.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. I mean, it's a really tough fundraising environment right now. But I'd say one of the first things that comes to mind is a lot of startups, young companies, they don't realize that when your fundraising round is in a lot of ways like a product launch, right? Like and momentum and buzz and excitement around your fundraising round. You have to kind of engineer that, right? You can't just be like, yeah, we're going to start I guess we're fundraising. Yeah, this is it. Okay, we've got a term sheet out. Okay, let's start emailing it out. Like, that's not how you do it, right? Like, you really need to plan it, 2-3 months in advance. Okay, we're going to launch the fundraising. Let's tee up some meetings. Let's get a press release announcing the fundraising round. Let's get that to some media outlets, do a little embargo list so it all goes out on the same day. Let's start trying to schedule, it really is like a product launch. And I think people, investors are like, did you see about this? They want to, there's a lot of FOMO that you kind of want to create with investors. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And that FOMO, that momentum, if you really treat it like a product launch, you can do that. The other thing I see a ton, overly long cold outreach emails. I mean, warm intros are obviously gold, right? Those are much, much, much preferred. And so you should try to network and get those kind of by any means necessary. LinkedIn's a great tool for that. But I've seen people that will just put together a crazy long cold outreach email that's like the entire history of the company and a couple chapters of Moby Dick, right? It's like, no one's going to read all this. Like, the average investor is going to spend 20 seconds reading your email, right? Your cold outreach email. So keep it to 20-second read time. You know what I mean? If you do attach a teaser deck, make sure it's 10 slides, give or take, right? It needs to be very, very short, concise, to the point. The point isn't to sell them on your business. The point is to intrigue them into getting on a call with you or asking for more information. That is it, right? That is it. They're not going to say yes after that email. All they can say is, I want a meeting, right? And that's all you should try to get. I think another one is, a challenge. Some people, mistakes on this is just communication. When you're fundraising and when you're having communications with investors, you should have a 12 to 24 hour clock on any request, and that's the delivery of the request, right? Any request, anything with investors, they can get distracted. They can get another opportunity. They can just think, man, if he can't get back to me and I'm trying to give him money, what's he going to do with the customer? So if you get a response, as quickly as possible, within the hour, whatever, just be like, I'll have you a response by end of day today, or, within 24 hours or whatever, and get them that response back. Even if it's, hey, we did the research here, it was our best guess, but we're not sure we can fully answer this question right now, or something like that, right? So I think communication's a big one. Maybe the last one, and I'm such a stickler for this because it just grinds my gears, but people that don't, I get it. Not everyone's a graphic designer. I get it. But people that won't find someone on Upwork or Fiverr to just have them make their deck look pretty and nice, consistent branding, consistent color pattern and color scheme use, fonts that all match, not walls of text, not a million stock images. I can't, for me at least, and I'm sure it's the same way for a lot of investors, the aesthetics of a deck hits you before anything else, and it can immediately set a mood and a tone for how you're coming in to the entire rest of the presentation. Because if I see some absolute BS in terms of like aesthetics and design, like you've got a tough hill to climb already, right? In my head. So those are the initial things I would mention. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so the way you explain the, looking at it as a product launch, I think is the most critical thing. That FOMO, because you want to be oversubscribed, basically. You want to make sure that people are desperate to get in. And I think with social media now and LinkedIn and so many different platforms to just talk about what's happening before you actually start fundraising, and talk a bit about, the disease area, the challenges and some of those things, so that actually people you're basically warming up leads, aren't you? So that when you speak to somebody, they've already got in their mind, oh, this is an area that's actually of interest. And I think the thing you said about the deck is like top of my mind. I had somebody who approached me actually to just to work. It wasn't for an investment. It was just to work on, help them launch the product. And when they sent me the deck, it just put me completely off. I just thought, if this is your baby, this is what you live and breathe, and this is the best you can do. It's like, if you really sent me this as your deck, and you want me to take it seriously, and I thought, how on earth are you going to get money? Because I don't even want to work with you just to help you launch the product. Never mind, give you cash. So I think. The things you said about the product, the FOMO, and then everything else you said is just about being professional, getting back to people on time, doing quality decks. And it's so easy, as you said, Canva, Upwork,
yes.
Fiverr. There's absolutely no excuse nowadays, because it doesn't cost you much to do it. It's very, very basic, and you have to get it done. So I'd agree with all that. And then, it's about getting that, it's the same thing you said about FOMO. It's just getting the excitement in the marketplace, so people are thinking, "Oh, right, yeah, this is a great product. The great founders. It's going to do great things."
Yeah, and real quick on this, one of the reasons FOMO is so important is because if an investor is interested in your company, right, what is the sense of urgency for them to do it now? Right. They can just wait a little bit till you're farther along. You've de-risked slightly more, right? Yeah. Maybe you're low on cash and they have more leverage to negotiate. So like they can always just be like, well, I'll wait a little bit, right? The only thing that will kind of like is like a tool or a weapon like against that is creating a sense of scarcity, right? That they're going to miss out, right? That people are interested in this route. It's going to fill up. So that's why they need to do it now. And that's why it's so important, because like I said, they will just try to sweat you out and wait, right? And follow up and be like, still haven't raised it yet. Like, and this is kind of crazy to me, but investors will even ask, how much cash on hand do you have? Like, how much runway do you have right now? And it's like, it's like, how much plank do I have to walk before you can like put the noose around my neck? Like, I hate that they are allowed to ask that question. It seems kind of like crazy to me. I'm like, how much money do you have in your checking account, bud? Like, I don't know. Like, anyways, I digress. But
okay, so I can't believe that we've already done 47 minutes, but I've got the last question, which probably won't be a short question either, but hey ho. And interesting enough, we said one of the first things we said is we should go deep and not wide. Now, I make no apologies, because this is the first episode in the series for the the H files. So I am definitely going to get Spencer back on to go deep in one of the key topics. Because what we want to do is get some feedback, see what people really are interested in, and then we can start going deep on specific topics. So I make no apologies for going wide on this one, because we're then going to go deep. So Spencer will be back on, so don't worry. So the last question is all about international expansion. So what are some of those common missteps that you've seen healthcare startups make, and how would you approach selecting the right international markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start with kind of the second part, like which international markets to go after. I mean, I think I've seen people make the mistake of just looking at some really kind of macro or surface level elements when they're trying to pick which market to go to. They're like, oh, India's massive. Like, it's got to be a big market. And then they'll like try to go there. And I'm not saying India is a bad market. I think it's great market for a lot of products, but like I think people don't appreciate the idiosyncrasies and the cultural uniqueness, whether that's the healthcare ecosystem and the economics and the payer structure and all of that stuff, or just simply cultural things around like, oh, this isn't done here, or like whatever the cultural nuance is. I feel like people don't really understand that and how it applies to the adoption, applicability, reimbursement, or how their device may sell in a specific market. So that's also very difficult to do, which leads me to my next piece of like common misstep here of they'll just kind of try to go it alone and like try to just find distributors there. And like, you know, if you think vetting a distributor in your own backyard is hard, right? Like try to do that for an international distributor. And so I always recommend kind of having, you know, frankly, honestly, someone like you, right, that understands these different international markets and can kind of, you know, not hold your hand, but teach you how to fish, right, in that market and kind of be your guide, you know, shepherd you into that market, shepherd you into some good relationships with some already vetted, pre-vetted distributor partners, right, and kind of show you the ropes. Like, I think trying to go it alone is a huge mistake that people make. You know, I think, you know, there was one other, I think, you know, international, when you're expanding into an international market, I think like people sometimes will underestimate like the shipping costs. I know this sounds weird, but like legitimately, like if you have a product that like is either super heavy or super large from like kind of a pallet to product perspective, right? How many product of your product can you fit on one pallet? Like you may eat up like such a significant amount of shipping costs that like it, you know, you're basically making no money. So I think like you really need to understand that. And this is kind of one of those like innovate around supply chain, right? Like, can you ship bulk non-sterile and have it packaged more like closer to the point of care, right? Where you're getting it sold in that country, because you may end up packaging it for less than you're doing it for where you're currently manufacturing it. You may avoid some import fees because it's a non-finished medical good. It's a subcomponent, right? And you can pack way more in there because it's not sterile packed, right? It's bulk non-sterile. So there, I think kind of the shipping and logistics piece and like, do you need part of your supply chain process to happen closer to the actual site on that foreign soil or whatever? I think those are things that not enough people think about. And that's like what kind of, that's more of like an opportunity for like real success. Ignoring it would be the mistake, right? I'd say. What are your thoughts? Are any of those resonating or?
No, every single one of them. I mean, obviously they're going it alone because I'd always suggest you come to somebody like me. But I call it the colonial mindset in terms of that people are successful, or they might not even be successful, but they think they understand their home market, and then they assume, oh, every market's going to be the same as long as it's big. Yeah, so the ones, India's always one. Then the US, because the US has, I think, something like 40% of the whole medtech or med device markets. Across the world, even though the population's only about 4%. And then they look at Africa, and then you always say, well, yeah, but you have to understand the nuances. So, for example, Africa's a massive market, but if you think you're going to sell a single-use product into Africa, you're dreaming, because they're just going to keep washing it. So, automatically, the value of that market has gone down by a factor of I don't know how many times. You know, and even if they were going to use it, which they're not, they're going to reuse everything, then they're not going to pay the price that you think they're going to pay. So that market may well be massive in terms of population, but it's not going to be worth that much to you. And then, as you said, it places like India with all the vagaries and the challenges in terms of it being a massive country. You know, you're not going to find one distributor, so you're then going to have to start thinking about 4, 5, 6 distributors. There's just so many things. But yeah, really, just understanding the market, I think, is the big issue. And then, you know, the second one or the third one that you mentioned about just understanding what it takes to get a product into the market before you even start selling it and the cost around that. And this is what I said earlier about that resource piece. People have and I don't blame them, because a lot of them are the founders, they're inventors, they're not business people. And they think, right, well, I've got a product, so I make it, it costs me this, so it costs me $20 to make, and I want to sell it for $100, and I want to sell it for $100, so that's $80 margin. No. It's not. So you have to understand fully before you go anywhere near a market, what is the cost going to be for you to get it onto the ground? And you should be doing that before you even speak to any distributors, because you're going to the distributor thinking, I've got $80 to work with, when actually you may only have 20. So, before you know it, you've offered it to a price to the distributor, which you think, oh, that's gonna give me loads of margin on that. Then by the time you've done all the calculations, and I've seen some people, I'm making a loss. So I think, the overarching statement is understand the market you're going into before you even think about putting any products into that market, because you're just setting yourself up a world of pain. And that's a nice segue into, so when we're talking about that, how does Exo Medtech help?
Yeah. So Exo Medtech, it's a really unique thing. So sometimes describing it can be almost like, people haven't heard of anything like this, but it's a membership-based community. I say community, people are like sometimes like, what is that, right? But it's a network. There are workshops, live events, office hours. We do pitch roast events. We're talking about decks that need some work. But it's the whole idea with the community and the network side of it is it's just a massive exchange of value, right? Like people have, hey, I got a link to this. Oh, I saw this really nice article. Did y'all see this new regulation? Oh, I got access to this database. Like, here's the Excel doc. Like, it's just a massive exchange of value. People making requests, people providing their insights, people sharing value, whether it's a take that they have or an asset or a resource or something like that. But it's also very peer-to-peer. Like you can, DM any one member in there. It's founders, clinicians, aspiring founders, service providers, mentors, consultants, experts. It's really kind of a huge, wide array of people. But then that's kind of the community and network side. But then we also have the playbook, which is, 45 lessons, intense, deep training on everything A to Z for medtech innovators, from kind of, are you solving a real problem? How do you quantify that? How do you qualitatively describe that problem and the impact on patients, all the way through designing a product, user needs, building it, manufacturing it, sales and distribution models, intellectual property, regulatory strategy. It's US focused on some of the regulatory piece and IP stuff as well. But really all the way kind of ending on capital strategy, fundraising, value in your company. It was kind of like the guidebook I wish I had 10 years ago when I was getting started. Like we kind of coined the term, like it's the MBA for medtech innovation. But yeah, it's really, the network. Like if you're in Idaho, if you're in wherever and you're trying to be a medtech innovator, it's tough to have that network. We want to bring that, to your fingertips, but also give you the tools, templates, downloads, and training with the playbook to make you successful and kind of give you a dangerous level of knowledge and kind of better prepare you to work with experts like yourself, like a patent attorney, like a regulatory consultant. So that's the goal. We launched in June. We've are approaching 100 members right now, which is fantastic. We've got a couple enterprise, university, med school, accelerator program customers. So it's growing. I would invite everybody to check it out. Exo Medtech, letter X, letter O, exomedtech.com. I think you're going to really like what you see, and it's very affordable. We tried to not price out the students, right? Or, biomedical engineering graduate students, all that stuff. So, that's what we're doing at Exo Medtech. It's been fun, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. And I'll drop the link in the podcast description when this goes out. So, if you haven't heard of it, then you now have. And if you haven't signed up, then there'll be a link for you to go and sign up, because, these things only work when you have a lot of people signing up. Because as Spencer said, it's a network. So the more people you have in there, the more people you have feeding into it, then the more it exponentially grows your knowledge base.
And I was going to say too, we will, Hakeem, anyone listening, we can put it in the show notes, but we'll give a discount with a coupon code as well for anybody that's listening. It makes it this far. We can put the coupon in the show notes. It'll give you 25% off discount to like 1 full year of access to Exo Medtech. So just a little teaser, and for the people who made it this far.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you very much, Spencer. As I said, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I will definitely be getting you on to go deep into a specific subject in the next few months. So stay tuned for that. But no, really appreciate all of the advice you've given. I think it's been a really good inaugural session.
Same. Honestly, this was great. I know I can be long-winded. We thought this was going to be a little bit shorter, but I had a blast. These were like such good dialogue. I hope the audience found it valuable. I just really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to be back next time.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. So that's a wrap, as they say, folks, and that's the first episode of the H Files. So I'm really hoping that you guys enjoyed it as much as myself and Spencer enjoyed recording it. Loads of great actionable takeaways, but if there's only one thing that you remember from that podcast, I'm sure there's more than that, but if there's only one thing, it's about getting an expert. Go and find somebody who is in the position that you are currently facing now. So because there's no real reason for you to go through all the heartache of making the mistakes that somebody else, an expert, will have already been through. So, lots of early stage medtech companies are concerned about the cost of getting an expert, but I can assure you the cost of getting an expert is going to be a lot less than making the mistakes that we've all made. Go and find someone who's been through those mistakes, who can advise you, who can guide you through the process, and can ensure that you actually flourish in your international expansion rather than making mistakes, faltering, paying costly bills. So that would be my key takeaway from this first episode. And if you want to pick up the show notes, head over to the salesaccelerationformula.com/podcast-show-notes, and you'll be able to subscribe to our mailing list and get show notes for every single episode. And as always, subscribe, like, and share with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who you think may be interested. But most of all, keep the feedback coming so that we can continue to improve and give you more of what you like. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and as I always do. Keep listening and keep growing.